Factories are meant to be loud with life and industry. But what happens when the machines stop and something else takes over tonight? We'll step inside Canada's most haunted factories, where shadows move without bodies. Whispers echo through steel corridors, and the ghosts of industry refuse to rest. Canada, Malting silos, Montreal, Quebec. You step through the rusted gates, the cold Montreal wind cutting against your face. Before you, the Canada malting silos rise like a forgotten cathedral, towering cylinders of corroded steel and crumbling concrete, abandoned since the early 1980s. The air smells of damp grain and rust, as if the building itself is rotting from the inside out. Your footsteps echo, unnaturally loud in the hollow chambers. Graffiti coats the walls, but under the layers of spray paint, you see something else long. Thin scratches carved deep into the concrete, in patterns too deliberate to be random. They say no one's supposed to be here after dark. Not because of security, there isn't any, but because of what explorers have heard inside. A photographer once claimed he caught the faint silhouette of a man in work overalls, standing at the far end of a silo, watching, unmoving, even when the shutter clicked. Others speak of a whispering sound, low and constant, like grain still pouring through ghostly machinery. You shine your flashlight upward, and that's when you hear it, a metallic clank above, followed by the slow scrape of something heavy, shifting in the darkness. The silos are empty, completely empty, yet the sound is getting closer. 2. Watson's Mill, Antioch, Ontario. Built in 1860. Watson's Mill was once the beating heart of Antioch, its great grinding stones turning day and night to mill flour for the growing community. The mill was owned by Joseph Currier, a respected businessman, and it was here, just 1 year after opening, that joy turned into tragedy. On March 11th, 1861, Joseph brought his new bride, Anne Crosby, to see the pride of his work. As she leaned over the railing of the second floor to watch the machinery below, her long dress was caught in the spinning shaft. In a heartbeat, she was pulled in. Joseph could only watch in horror as the grinding gears took her life. After that day, the mill never felt the same. Workers whispered about hearing soft footsteps on the upper floor long after closing. A faint floral scent, said to be Anne's perfume, would drift through the air without warning. Some claimed to see her reflection in the second-floor windows, gazing down at the river, her face pale and sorrowful. Even now, visitors report strange happenings, an icy hand brushing against their arm, the swish of a skirt disappearing around a corner, and on rare occasions, the sound of a woman humming over the roar of the machinery that hasn't turned in over a century. 3. Antioch, British Columbia. Once a thriving mining town, in the early 1900s, Antioch was built to fuel the massive copper smelter that dominated the valley. Hundreds of workers and their families lived here, their lives tied to the factory's fiery heart. But in 1935, disaster struck. An enormous fire swept through the smelter and much of the town. Antioch never recovered. Within a few years, it was abandoned, left to the rain, the forest, and the ghosts. Today, reaching Antioch means crossing rough waters and hiking into the wilderness. The moment you arrive, the silence presses against you. The skeletal remains of the smelter rise out of the moss, its chimneys cracked, its iron bones rusting away. But it's the stories from modern explorers that chill the blood. Some speak of hearing the faint clang of metal, as if hammers still strike molten copper deep inside the ruins. Others have seen lights flicker in the smelter windows, though there's no electricity for miles. One photographer swears he captured a figure helmeted, soot-covered, standing in the shadows of the furnace hall, staring straight at him. And sometimes, when the wind shifts, you can hear it, the low, rhythmic rumble of machinery in a town where the fires have been cold for nearly a century. 4. Old Spaghetti Factory, Vancouver, British Columbia. In the heart of Vancouver's gas town, the old spaghetti factory seems warm and inviting, with the clink of glasses and the scent of pasta drifting through the air. But beneath the laughter and candlelight lies a history tied to the iron rails that run right through the restaurant. This building once sat directly on a busy streetcar line, and at its center stands a genuine antique trolley car, Car 53, permanently parked as part of the dining room's charm. It's said the trolley is more than just a relic. Staff have reported a man dressed in an old conductor's uniform, sitting silently inside, hands folded in his lap. When approached, he fades like smoke. The most unsettling part. His face matches that of a conductor who died in a streetcar accident decades before the restaurant opened. But he isn't alone. Diners have spotted a little girl holding a balloon, drifting between tables before vanishing near the front entrance. In the restroom, a red-haired man has been seen in the mirror's reflection, only for patrons to turn around and find no one there. Even after closing, the staff hear it, the metallic screech of wheels on tracks, echoing faintly through the building. Yet no streetcar has passed this way in over half a century. 5. Gulf of Georgia Cannery, Richmond, British Columbia. Built in 1894, the Gulf of Georgia Cannery was once the beating heart of Canada's West Coast fishing industry. Inside its wooden walls, the air was thick with the scent of saltwater and salmon, the roar of conveyor belts, and the clatter of machinery working day and night. For decades, men and women toiled here, gutting, packing, and shipping fish across the world. But with the industry's decline, the cannery fell silent in the 1970s, or so people thought. Today, as a museum, the building still hums with a different kind of energy, one that sends shivers down the spine of visitors and staff alike. Guides tell of cold spots that drift across rooms, even on hot summer days. The sound of boots crunching on wooden floors has been heard in empty hallways. Most unsettling is the ghostly figure of a fisherman, soaked as though fresh from the sea, standing in the dim light near the old processing line. His face is pale, his eyes hollow, and he drips water onto the floor, yet when approached, there's no trace of moisture at all. Some nights, the machines themselves seem to come alive. Conveyor belts creak, gears turn, and the faint smell of freshly canned salmon fills the air. It's as if the cannery refuses to let go of the countless souls who once worked and perhaps died within its walls. 6. Canada Cement Company Plant, Lakefield, Ontario. You stand before the skeletal remains of the Canada Cement Company plant, its massive concrete silos looming like sentinels over Lakefield. Built in the early 1900s, it once roared with machinery and the voices of workers. Now, silence reigns except for the occasional whisper, carried on the wind. Explorers often describe a strange heaviness here, as if the air itself presses down on you. Some claim to hear the clang of metal tools echoing in the empty halls, long after the last worker left. Others speak of shadowy figures slipping between crumbling doorways, gone before you can focus your eyes. One urban explorer swears he saw a lone figure in a hard hat standing at the far end of a corridor. But as he approached, the figure dissolved into thin air, leaving only the smell of dust and damp cement. Perhaps it's the restless spirits of those who labored here, bound to the place that defined their lives. Or perhaps something far darker has claimed the ruins as its own. Either way, if you walk these cracked floors, don't be surprised if something unseen walks right behind you. 7. Mill of Kintail, Mississippi Mills, Ontario. You step onto the creaking wooden floorboards of the 200-year-old Mill of Kintail. The air feels thick here, as if the building itself remembers every life that passed through. Once a thriving grist mill, it now stands as a historic site, yet its history is far from silent. Locals speak of ghost hunts where strange orbs appeared in photos, where unexplained white shapes drifted across the room. Visitors tell of doors knocking when no one is outside, as if some unseen hand is desperate to be let in. On one particularly cold night, a paranormal team set up their equipment in the mill. They heard rhythmic knocks, 3 in a row, coming from the old grain room. When they called out, the knocks answered back, louder. Some say it's the spirit of a former miller, bound to the grind of his work for eternity. Others believe it's something far older, something that has claimed the mill as its home long before the first stone was laid. And as you stand there in the dim light, listening to the slow, deliberate creak of the rafters above, you realize you are not alone in the Mill of Kintail. 8. Hearn Generating Station, Toronto, Ontario. Opened in 1951, the Hearn Generating Station was once one of the largest coal-fired power plants in Canada. A towering industrial cathedral of steel beams, vast turbines, and echoing chambers. For decades, it churned out electricity to feed Toronto's growing demand, its smokestacks belching plumes into the sky. But inside, the work was grueling and dangerous, scalding steam lines, live electrical systems, and crushing machinery claimed more than a few lives over the years. One of the most chilling legends dates back to the early 1970s. A maintenance worker named Carl supposedly vanished during a midnight shift. His co-workers searched the labyrinth of catwalks and machinery, but found no trace except for his hard hat, resting neatly on a control panel. In the weeks that followed, operators reported hearing heavy footsteps pacing the upper walkways, followed by the distinct sound of metal tools clanging against railings, even when no one was there. Since its closure in 1983, the massive, decaying structure has drawn urban explorers and terrified them. Many claim to hear faint whispers over the wind inside the turbine hall, or spot a lone figure in a hard hat watching from high above. Those who've dared to shout up at him say he lifts an arm as if to wave before melting into the shadows between the steel beams. 9. Dominion Bridge Company Plant, Lachine, Quebec. Founded in 1886, the Dominion Bridge Company plant was once the beating heart of Canada's steel industry. Massive girders, bridge spans, and railway components took shape here, destined to connect cities and cross vast rivers. The clang of steel, the hiss of welding torches, and the roar of machinery filled the air day and night. But with such colossal work came colossal danger. Molten metal spills, collapsing scaffolds, and crushing accidents claimed dozens of lives over the decades. One of the plant's darkest legends tells of a welder named Etienne, who vanished during a night shift in the 1940s. Co-workers swore they saw him fall from a steel beam into a vat of molten metal. No body was ever recovered, only a strange, warped lump of steel that some claimed looked like a man curled in agony. After the plant closed, the cavernous space became a haven for trespassers and thrill-seekers. They often reported the sound of grinding metal, echoing through empty halls, and cold drafts that seemed to push them toward the vats. The most unsettling stories speak of a lone figure in a welding mask, standing motionless on a high beam. Witnesses say the mask tilts ever so slightly, as if watching them, and when they look away for even a second, he's gone, only the faint smell of burning metal left behind. Bitum Mount, near Fort McMurray, Alberta. Deep in the boreal wilderness of northern Alberta lies Bitum Mount, the crumbling remains of a once pioneering oil sands extraction plant. Built in the 1920s and expanded in the 1940s, it was an ambitious industrial experiment meant to unlock the province's vast bitumen reserves. For a brief moment, the site bustled with workers, heavy machinery, and the promise of prosperity. But the harsh environment, high costs, and technical failures sealed its fate. By the 1950s, Bitum Mount was abandoned to the elements. Locals whisper that the place never truly went silent. Former workers spoke of strange happenings, even before its closure tools disappearing, machinery starting on its own, and an eerie hum resonating through the processing units late at night. After abandonment, those few who ventured there described unsettling sensations, the sound of boots crunching gravel just behind them, the metallic clang of unseen machinery, and fleeting shadows moving among the rusted towers. One chilling account tells of an urban explorer who found fresh handprints in the thick dust coating an old control panel, prints far too large to be human. When he turned to leave, he heard a slow, deliberate breathing right next to his ear, though he stood utterly alone in the frozen air. These factories may have shut down years ago, but their stories, their screams, still linger in the rust and dust. Tell me, would you dare step inside, knowing you might not walk out alone?